with storytelling, there are probably 3 key techniques so that every listener here can take those techniques away. Storytelling I found, so this is not something I've read anywhere, just reflecting on how I've used storytelling. Number 1 technique I've used is an analogy. So one of the examples at the conference, which is the New South Wales Cyber Resiliency Summit, where Chirag, you and I met.
Yes.
I had a photo up, which was from Dubai. It was 2 dolls sitting on the opposite ends of some steps. It was a beautiful photo I'd taken when I was there on holidays, and it was actually a painting. It looks real, absolutely amazing. And all I used was that those 2 dolls sitting on the opposite end of those staircases, I used that to explain something around cybersecurity regulation, that it's not a compliance issue, it's not a security issue. So I used an analogy by using that photo, which had 2 people sitting at the opposite end, trying to show that we can't have compliance and security on opposite ends. They need to work together. So my technique number 1 is have a little analogy. You just need a photo and an analogy to go with it. That's one of the simplest ways. The second tip, which gets a little bit harder, but again, something that you can use from every day, is a technique called representation. So again, in that conference that we met, and I think I was presenting just before lunch, I had a lovely photo up of 3 types of foods, and I was talking about entrees, the golgappas from India, the Mediterranean main, and the French dessert, if I remember correctly. And as much as we were all thinking about food, there was a cyber analogy around it. And I was making the point that we don't go out for dinner or lunch and go to 3 different restaurants for the 3 different cuisines. We normally go, okay, we're having Thai tonight or Indian. But I used that representation of 3 photos with those 3 different cuisines to make the point that from a cyber perspective, companies are using multiple cloud providers and talking about what the risks are. And the fact that 12 months later, you are smiling and remembering shows that that story stuck.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So representation is another really good way where if you're talking about multiple cloud providers, rather than saying that or writing it down, I just used an image of 3 different types of food to get that message across. That again, and you need to do a bit of prep for it, but it's still doable. The hardest one is the purest of storytelling, and I call it storytelling. Another photo I used in that conference was I had a Lego train, which sort of represented the Harry Potter train, but it was actually a train in the photo. But my whole story was around the Mumbai trains and the deaths that were happening in front of the trains on the rail crossing. And my whole story, which was a real story, I think I spoke about the story for 5 minutes. And then my point was, well, hang on, the cyber controls we put in place, we can't just put a bell and put the crossings. We needed to educate people. We needed to actually get into the human behavior. Now that is probably the hardest, where you find a real story, there is meaning to it, and you find an image that represents that story. So they're the 3 techniques that I would say you could do.